My name is Ben McLeish and I'm from Altmetric, and I'm here to sort of talk to you about what Altmetric does in general, what it does specifically in the medical and pharmaceutical world, and some of the ways in which our customers use our data around the world. So the first thing to explain, I suppose, about Altmetric is it tracks all the stuff that traditional citations and impact factor don't. So those traditional types of citations of academic works or data were by other researchers, people who are writing about this research in other papers. They'll cite it, and that means that you have this nice tight ring of academic citations, academic usage, but it doesn't really tell you anything about the way it's affecting the world. It won't give you insights into perhaps online opinion, the prevalence in social media or in news, or even in things like policy of where this research ends up being used. And so Altmetric is a fairly small company that tracks where research is mentioned in these, what we consider to be mainstream areas of research, mainstream areas of dissemination and attention, but which in reality, if you look at it from the academic side, that's considered alternative or new, but it's the real world for the rest of the population. And so we spend our time tracking attention on social media to research, or data sets or anything that's web native. We'll look if it's used in Wikipedia in terms of beefing up a citation for something. Is it occurring in policy documents? Do the publications of the European Union cite pieces of work that come from you as a researcher or from your institution, and so forth? Of course, we cover things like news and blogs and more traditional scientific output areas like Faculty of 1000, the medical recommendation service, where you're probably not going to find the general public using this material. But we collect all of that together and put it in one place. You will see those, or in the beginning part of Altmetric, the early years of the company, which started sort of in 2010, you would see our very colorful badges that I've highlighted for you there on publisher pages, because publishers, if you look at their websites, they're very nicely designed to help you discover new materials and save it and manage it. They've done a pretty good job. But one area that was always guaranteed to be empty on any publisher's site was the comments page under the article, because people don't go there to discuss the materials. It was seen as quaint, boring, unexciting. It's usually lacking in features. It's just a commentary box. You've got to sign in for the first time. No one does this. What they instead do is naturally share it on the social media platforms that are designed for that kind of interaction, that do it in a much more rich manner. They will go and write news articles or blogs about it. There will be a Wikipedia citation. No one really goes onto the original article to comment on the website. And so instead, Altmetric offers these very nice badges where we'll show you all the attention across all the different places where it happens in a nice embeddable way, which the publishers simply license, so they can import all the discussions that are happening around the world in lots of different places that are never going to be unified into one platform. No one's going to mix Facebook and news and blogs into a super platform that you log into once. They'll always happen in different places. So we go around collecting that together and at least showing it in one place, so that publishers could originally say, look at how nice our materials are, look how much traction and attention it's getting, look how many people have read it. It's way more interesting than just downloads. So they could essentially use it as a marketing tool. Here's an example of if you were to click on one of those items. This is actually a clinical trial, because in addition to tracking research articles, we do track clinical trials, we track books, we track data sets that people upload onto places like Figshare. There they get given a data site DOI. Pretty much anything is citable these days. And it doesn't get cited in academic materials, it gets cited in other places. And so here, for example, this clinical trial has been, as you can see by the color wheel there, the donut we call it, it's been in immense numbers of news outlets. It's even made its way onto the blogosphere, one blog. There's some Twitter attention and so forth, and so it's tabulated and shown so that people can get a very quick idea, if I'm running this clinical trial, what's being said, when was it said, was it positive? Each one of those things is a link, so you can always go and see the original attention. So in the years since that we've designed this technology to be able to detect where items are being mentioned online in different places, in different formats, sometimes a tweet, sometimes a blog post, we have amassed a decent number of customers worldwide that use this in lots of different ways. So academic institutions will want to see all of their attention broken down by author and department for their entire institution, because somebody just asked me, the research director of the University of Cologne, how many times has your research, not the name University of Cologne, but the research itself, which may not even say University of Cologne in it, been mentioned online in the news? And the news may not mention the name University of Cologne either. How are you meant to work out that this, one of many thousands of items that come from your institution, does actually belong to you? So we are able to create footprints structured according to that institutional repository in that way. Same thing for pharmaceutical companies. You'll want to be able to track not just your own research or the research that's about your drugs or whatever it is. You may want to have a look at what the competitors are doing. And since we track everything that has an identifier, you are able to compare data sets and see how attention, opinion, news tracks over time for different kinds of outputs. And lastly, even governments are getting in on the game now and want to know are the public making use of our policy documents? Is the research that we're creating being used in other people's policy? What's the general opinion of genetically modified food studies? You know, what are people saying about these kinds of research? Because it's a very easy way of sort of gauging that, and it's immensely difficult to do by hand. I mean, just the shortening services alone online will disguise even basic links unless you have a way of unpacking that like we do. We have to track not 10, not 15 of those services, but 6,500 different short-linking services so that we can say to you, these are the people sharing your stuff online. Here's where it's being mentioned, something you wouldn't find with a Control-F search. They use this in a couple of different ways. You do get a sense of the whole life cycle of a piece of research when it comes out. So beginning at midnight and going clockwise, it's an easy way to get a sense of how well the publishing platform has done in disseminating your research. If you were to publish with Nature and you get, I don't know, 100 mentions, it will give you an Altmetric score, an attention score of something like 15. That can be quite good, but not for Nature. Nature items tend to be distributed more. They tend to write supporting blog entries. They tend to be really good at dissemination. People read a lot of Nature magazine. They'll share the items themselves quite naturally and organically. So you may want to think to yourself, well, did I just publish a complete dud? Or is somebody not doing their work, perhaps including me, in actually sharing this material, making it available online? You can change your tactics based on this, moving down to the between 3 and 6 p.m. Or a.m. Let's make it early. You can have a look at these tactics and work out, well, is there particular key opinion leaders I want to reach out to? Are there people that, once they talk about my research, that really does balloon? Are there particularly negative voices that can be addressed through outreach means and so forth? You can use this to report. And you can even use it actually to monitor those last two sections of the pie there. You can keep an eye on certain types of research by keyword, by just dumping a load of identifiers in and having a look, by getting updates every time new research mentions occur from a particular author or something like that. So it's a better way than just basic Google alerts. If you use Google alerts a lot, you do that on keywords. This is monitoring whether research is actually mentioned, no matter what is actually said. We put all of this data in one place so that by now we've amassed something like almost 11 million items for which there is some kind of attention out there. And that goes across pretty much any kind of study area or therapeutic area that you can imagine. Maths obviously comes low on that. People don't tend to talk about maths research a lot online. Physics is very high. Medicine is of course huge, and health in general. And so we've put all this in one place so that our users don't just see their own items, but they can actually go out and explore what's hot right now. What is the trend with regard to this type of research? It looks a little bit like that. And it's something that does allow for a good sense of what people say. What kind of actionable insights could somebody who works in the medical communications field begin with this? Being able to have a really good sense of how social media behaves, how news behaves, what blogs are there out there that either give a hard time to certain types of research or are helpful in spreading more information, educating the public. If there's anything we could have learned from the last 2 years, it would be that public education on research and science is rather important. So we think that we do help in that regard a little bit. Like I say, we do structure it according to the individual customer using our data, a government project team with lots of different projects with different research, and each one will have this laid out differently to a departmental structure at university. Obviously, a large pharmaceutical company is going to structure it by drug, perhaps. Depends how they've got their data organized. Or you can go completely rogue and just simply plug into the Altmetric API, which we do license to commercial organizations as well. We also, because we do work quite a lot with researchers, individual researchers who are using our data for research on altmetrics or want to use it just to bolster their CV, we don't charge. So that's there's a fairly open source side to our system as well. You'll be able to look at our badges without a license. If you're an individual researcher, you are able to get in touch with us as well. But this is the kind of stuff that you can just plug straight into a business intelligence system, like Tableau. Tableau is one that a lot of people use, and they do clever, weird internal stuff that they don't want us to know about, where they can just grab our API and just plug our data in, and we don't know really what they're doing. So there's transparency and there's the whole business side of things, which is, well, we want to be monitoring things, but we want to do it, in a controlled internal fashion, so that we can do sort of what we want with that. And part of that commercial API, or just the standard badge API for our researchers, does mean that you can embed this data wherever you like. So we have customers, for example, that write newsletters, and if you imagine a newsletter without the Altmetric badge, you're just sending a bunch of articles to people to read. They may not have any sense about just how attentive the audience is being, the online audience is being. If you can get a sense from just small graphics that there's a lot of buzz around this, why might that be? Could it be good or bad news? Is it an immense jump forward? Have we just breached the blood-brain barrier without the need for surgery? That's a real example from 2 years ago when we started tracking clinical trials. You know immediately from just the way it looks and being able to click in, this is a big deal. You would know that if you're a specialist anyway, but you get a real sense that other people now have a really good idea of some major milestone being reached. Not everything has one of those lovely identifiers, like a DOI or something. Some people write blog entries. There are real examples of this. The World Cancer Research Fund runs a blog, and they consider their blog to be a form of output. They want to know how people are dealing with that as well. So if you've got the right metadata on your HTML site, I'm not going to get technical now, but if you have the right layout for it, Altmetric can even help those guys, can turn up and say, well, we can tell you the next time that your blog entries are shared on Facebook, or make it into the news or into other people's blogs, which does happen. People link to the WCRF all the time. They want to know about that. So you can even apply this to things that aren't really even considered research, as long as they have the right structure. There's some fun stuff to play with at demos.altmetric.com. I won't spend any time talking about it, but we can lay this data out by geographical region, by institution. So you can even say, this data actually comes from University of Oxford, for example, if we're going to take a local example. Some of our customers have gone right off the deep end and have started doing modeling and reporting and trend analysis over time of when things gain traction. Like in the early days of YouTube, when you could see a YouTube video's attention, like first social media share was here, and then it goes up, and then first news story. They somehow managed to do that. We do a similar kind of thing as well, and we write full reports on what we find from our own data, because it's actually quite interesting to study it ourselves. All we're doing is collecting it. We can't tell you everything it means until we've also studied it. So we do author reports like the Altmetric mentions and the communication of medical research, which deliberately, I think it's about a 30 or 40 page study about, well, what are the trends when it comes to medical research? How does it disseminate? Where does it come from? What impact does it have? Does it also then occur in policy and things like that? Final slide. We obviously spend a long time training our customers on this stuff because it is still fairly new, it's still fairly misunderstood, or rather the understandings are developing, I should say. So we spend a lot of time hearing what customers ask us about, standard questions. Like, for example, if you haven't seen the ORCID presentation that was in the same session, do go back and watch Josh Brown's one on ORCID. They will say, how do you work together with ORCID? Can I just dump all my ORCIDs in there and have my institutional attention? Well, the answer to that actually is no, because as Josh says in the talk, ORCIDs are portable across institutions. So you are pulling in sometimes data from the University of Cambridge for people who studied there or were researching there before they moved to Oxford. So we always have to sort of train people and explain to people how different types of identifier behave. But we get there in the end every time, and it's always a lot of fun. I won't spend too much time on this slide, I think, because that was what I thought was my last slide. It is interesting to watch how customers of ours or people who are using our data begin to ask different questions. Is our institutional mission working? Is our open access policy working? Are the scores and the attention for items which are not open access actually higher than the items that are openly available? And why might that be? Why are people not reading the stuff for which there are no barriers, natural barriers to the general population, versus items that are actually behind a paywall? If they're getting more attention, why is that? Does it tell us something about where we're publishing, the behavior of that publisher, the quality of publications that are still behind a paywall versus the ones that are not? Is it something about the headline? Is there some clickbait notion going on with science right now? How can we reach new stakeholders? How can we do outreach for PR or marketing or communications efforts? That's some of the stuff that we've seen people take away that we never actually anticipated. That comes from our customer base, not from us. Any questions, let me know, but otherwise, thanks very much for your time.